Hello and welcome as we continue our conversations here from the African Investment Forum at the Santin Convention Center in Johannesburg. We're at the final lap of the African Investment Forum. For the past 3 days, we've been talking about investment, deals, and transactions that could come on the continent. So far, we had about 56 deals that were brought up at the top of this forum, where President earlier said deals worth about $66.7 billion will be discussed here at this forum. After 3 days of transactions, boardroom sessions, and a lot of conversations going and negotiations happening in there, and pitches made from different companies on their projects. We had we got 52 deals got ahead, and about $40.1 billion worth of deals as announced. Akinwumi Adesina is standing by right now to give us the final press conference of the African Investment Forum.
So I'm going to hand over at this point to the panel to provide just short comments on their experiences so far and what they perceive to have been the highlights of Africa Investment Forum 2019. And I'm going to start to my extreme left with Sanjeev.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. And I suppose most of us were there at the closing of the plenary session, so I don't want to necessarily repeat what I said, but I did say that to me this was the AAA performance because it showed Africa being active, adaptable, and aggressive, which means come and get us, because we are on our way. But the one other additional point I will make to try and set the conversation going is that I was just sharing it with one of my colleagues, that there was a very different vigor and energy that I felt in the last 3 days. And it's perhaps because it was deal-focused, that it perhaps attracted a younger variety of people who probably have to go back to the head offices telling the bosses that we did these deals. Because the buzz I saw, the focus I felt, and certainly the energy that was pretty palpable told me that people were here because they wanted to get things done. They were not here to mark time. And that is probably the only additional point I would like to make to the one I made earlier. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. And we'll go next to Renee Auenberg.
Thank you very much. For us at the African Export-Import Bank, this event has become the platform for investments and doing transactions in Africa. It has been a huge, huge success, surpassing all our expectations this week. We've closed a number of transactions. We have a number of pipeline deals we are looking at. We'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate again the President of the African Development Bank and his team for having launched this initiative and all the founding partners. And we look forward to a continuous partnership and success in this event and platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we go to Elaine Ebobise, Africa 50. Oh, sorry. Sadu, I do apologize. You're next.
Okay, thank you very much, Victor, once again. I think for me, maybe in addition to what I had earlier indicated with my experience and what I'm expecting going forward, what we also covered this year more, I think, intensely would be the climate change transactions. Because, I mean, we discussed climate change at a high level, at the policy and how it affects, but we brought it back to the nitty-gritties, to the point that in one of the boardroom sessions, there were 2 climate change projects that DBSA had put into the pipeline with regards to waste to energy. And I think that is important because until we bring it into the nuts and bolts, it's very difficult for people to appreciate the effects of the climate change because we all talk about it as a topical. I think that is very important for me in addition to what I had earlier indicated. But I would like to see, for the benefit of those who are not there, what I then said, I would like to see more projects on the project preparation side. More of that will form the pipeline, but importantly, to see the project preparation projects graduating from being prepared to reaching financial close on the commercial and on a long-term basis. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Zodwa Mbele, Development Bank of Southern Africa, and a pitch there for green finance. We go next to Elaine Ebobise, Africa 50.
Thank you, Victor. Again, I want to repeat what I said in the closing ceremony, and I just said what I heard from our leaders, that this is our time, this is Africa's time. But I think that many of us, all of us really have been going to lots of conferences, and I'm sure 90% here, or even 100% will say that there is no such conference anywhere else that is exclusively focused on making deals. closing deals, moving deals forward. This is a unique platform which is extremely focused on deal, and we have to thank and acknowledge this leadership and the vision of my chairman, President Adesina, that actually thought about this idea, and this idea is now a reality. Now, one of the things that I particularly like, that I actually observe here, because it's also really a mantra at Africa 50, is speed, execution speed, trying to implement deals as quickly as possible. Because in our continent, we have a lot of needs. We have big goals, and we cannot take as much time as other regions have taken to get to those goals. We have to be faster. So having those kind of instruments that enables us to leapfrog, to go faster than what we've seen in other regions is really very timely. So I was very excited. I was very happy the last 3 days. And of course, we'll continue to work in partnership with the African Development Bank, the African Investment Forum, and other partners here, because one of the mantra here is synergizing, working together. And we look forward to announcing even more deals when we come here next year.
Thank you very much. I will come next to Vuyewa Bumendini, the DDG of the Ministry of Finance, South Africa, and we'll come back later on to Dr. Adesina.
Thank you very much, Victor. From the government of South Africa, we are very, very pleased with the outcome. This event is a win-win for everyone, investors, governments, and project sponsors. And we'd like to encourage more governments to take this opportunity to lure investors into their countries, in addition to them going on their own international road shows. Project preparation is key. We need to see more bankable projects, reaching financial closures, money's coming in. That should be the ultimate goal of this forum. Last year, the goal was transactions, transactions, transactions. This year, promise made, promise kept. Next year, we want to see monies in. We want to hear how many financial closures have happened. We want to see more deals being signed, like we did with the Ghana SkyTrain. So thank you. See you in 2010 in Johannesburg, Sandton, the home. See you 2020 in Johannesburg, Sandton, the home of the AIF. Thank you.
What a powerful plug there. We'll go next to Admasu Tadesse, Trade and Development Bank.
Well, indeed, a lot has been said. We all know a lot was achieved at this AIF, but I think one important point was proven at this AIF too. What was proven is we were not lucky last year, right? Because AIF 2 was bigger and better, with new innovations, attracting so many more people. So we now have a formula. And the AIF is now an institution in the continent that can continue for many years to come. For me personally, of course, representing TDB, we were very, very pleased that the Continental Free Trade Agreement featured very prominently in this AIF in the same year where it was ratified and came into force. And we managed to do, I think, $450 million of deals in trade finance in this AIF, which is unprecedented. And in case some of my partners think TDB is being greedy and keeping all this business to itself, I can assure you that the synergization was very much in action. And we've shared a lot of that already with 2 partners. And ADB, of course, is one of them. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Admasu Tadesse. We go next to Maria Shaw-Barragan of the European Investment Bank.
Thank you very much. And the European Investment Bank is the Bank of the European Union. We feel very much amongst friends. Most of you are partners, and we're working together in many of these deals. For us, we were here last year, and yes, it was not luck. It was a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work has been put to make the success of this Africa Investment Forum of this year. And I do want to congratulate the organization for having had so many women amongst the investors. So not women as beneficiaries of the investments, but women amongst the investors. And this is making a big difference. I can tell you that for the European Investment Bank, this year what we have brought is many more transactional officers, both from our offices in Africa and from the headquarters. So we had learned from last year that this is where deals are made and that we needed to be well equipped. From the boardrooms, I have a few takeaways that I hope next year we will be able to show that we have closed deals with them. One is on affordable housing in energy efficient social housing. Another one is on clean cooking solutions, and this is extremely important. There was a very interesting deal on wave-powered desalination, and we're going to pursue that one. A number of deals in blue economy and in circular economy, and also quite a lot of innovative products, innovative processes, and innovative solutions. I also want to congratulate you for the pitching area, and I personally used it. So I pitched, we have a new initiative in the European Investment Bank to support gender lens investment, and this is called She Invest, and I was pitching for this. I think it was a fantastic way of reaching out to people. So what I see is that the Africa Investment Forum has become a great opportunity and is really bringing into reality the Africa-Europe Alliance, and it is fantastic to see all the power, and please don't leave us out. We want to be part of what's going on in here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Shaw-Barragan. And we go next to Chinelo Anohu, Africa Investment Forum.
Well, thank you very much. I think what I'm doing here is harvest all the comments, and thank you for all the incoming support in the Africa Investment Forum and the team. And I'd like to say that this has really proven to be a transformative ecosystem for these transactions across the continent. And I think what is key is the sincerity of purpose with which everybody comes to the room. There is no underhand deals or underhand people thinking that they are doing anyone a favor. People come to the room with expectations and they leave fulfilled. So I thank everyone, and we continue the work. I keep reiterating that the purpose of the African Investment Forum transcends these 3 market days. The work is way beyond that. We come to the market at the end of the year, but during the year, with the, thanks to the deal tracker, thanks to the platform, the digital platform, thanks to the concerted effort of curating all the deals, this work is ongoing. I encourage everyone who didn't make it to the boardroom this year. There's a boardroom coming in 2020, and there will be boardrooms in between, so that we move not just from financial closure, but to actual implementation of these projects. It's not enough for the Africa Investment Forum to have reached financial close. We are also going to track implementation of these deals. So if it's an energy plant that has reached financial close, we'd like to see it in action. We'd like to see rice being produced. We'd like to see houses actually being lived in, thanks to the Africa Investment Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chinelo. And last but certainly not the least, the chairman of the Africa Investment Forum and the president of the African Development Bank, Akiomi Adesina.
Well, thank you very much, Victor, and thank you to all of you for being here for this closing press conference. Before I focus on the forum itself, what will we have done without you covering it? Because you, the media, are the one that actually helps us to project this to the rest of the world. And here is Africa, in which people don't really realize there's a tremendous amount of opportunities. They think so much of risk, and as you heard from Vezit today, risk is opportunity. And Africa is not riskier than other continents. In fact, rate of return in Africa is much higher than many other regions of the world. And so we just want to make sure that the narrative of Africa is a correct narrative. We want people to see our continent in a different light. It's not a continent of people begging for food. It's not a continent of people desperate for a handout. It's a continent that's desperate for people that believe in it to invest in it. So it's all about investing in Africa. That's what this is all about. And I want to thank you, all the media, for doing that for us. And we from here will thank you, because you're the ones shining the cameras on us. I like to say that there's no doubt in my mind that Africa is working. And this forum shows it loud and clear. You take a look at Africa today, the reason why we have a little bit of a spring in our steps is because Africa is working. You've got 37 countries. that are growing at 3 to 5% and above 5%. 20 countries growing about 5%. 17 countries growing at 3 to 5%. That's phenomenal, but anyway. And so I just want people to know that we are here because we see Africa working, and we want to put all our collective financial muscle behind Africa to go faster. It's almost like an Olympic race. You win bronze, then you got to work harder to win silver. Then you have to work harder to win gold. And even after you now win gold, they tell you how to set a world record, right? And so we will continue to work hard to put all that Africa needs behind all the investments. We want this to be a thriving continent at the cutting edge of investor interest around the world. As we are here, we are so mindful of our own collective responsibility. It's a lot of collective responsibility on all of us to make sure that things work. This, what you see here, and also others that are not sitting here, that are all of you that are partners, is partnership for investment in Africa. That's really it. From the project promoters, project developers, project sponsors, the investors, we that do risk, we that finance, it's all about partnership for investments in Africa. But as Chinelo said, it's not just partnership for investment. It's also partnership for delivering impact for Africa. We want to make sure that the lives of Africans are improved drastically, that we reduce inequality in Africa. It can't just be for a few. It has to be for everybody. So there's a sense of collective responsibility on all of us to make sure that we deliver. Africa is impatient for development. It's impatient. We all are economists, financial people here. We want to discount the future to the present quickly. And so everything that we do is to make all our deals and transactions happen with a sense of urgency, if I might say. A sense of urgency, because it's almost as if you can hear the people. You can almost hear those that want electricity, those that need water, those that want better housing, as you said, and all of that. If we just listen a little carefully, you can almost feel it. And so we have a sense that, yes, it's great. We've done great. We did, it's phenomenal, $40.1 billion here in terms of investment interest. But beyond that, we're going to make sure that we follow this to make sure the projects deliver and meet the needs of those that we are here to serve, which is Africa's people. I think that's very important for us. And I want to say that for next year, as you've been hearing, CEO of Africa 50, Alain Ebobisse, has already put me as chairman under pressure, and I got my board members here. So he added that to my KPI, located. And so we just have to make sure that next year we'll do, I'm sure, much better, as Tadase said, in terms of trade finance. And as Victor said, it's 2020. 2020 is when you see it clearly, So I guess that's when the song, I can see clearly now, the rain is gone, becomes one that we can sing for next year. For next year, three things are going to be important for us. And I'm glad that my colleague from the European Investment Bank mentioned this, is youth. Then we will also have women, a lot more focusing on investment in women businesses. You will see a lot more. We had this year over 600 women. They are not, like you said, they are investors. They are, and you're going to see, we want next year to be a bigger event around women investors on the continent. As I said, when a bird flies with two wings, it flies. We want the second wing of Africa to fly, to be synchronized, so that Africa, when women empowers and invest in all of its women, Africa will fly with two wings. The last one I want to say is on urban development. The Premier, David Makura, is not here with us as we are closing. DG, thank you for being here. And also Chairman, thank you for being here. But that's because they are having, and also Minister Dlamini Zuma, they are having a meeting in Durban where all the mayors are together to look at the challenges of urban development. Population is rising, need for water, need for sanitation, need for energy, clean energy, need a lot for transport. We also have to make sure that we have manufacturing capacity, people can get jobs. So all these things are going on. And fortunately, ourselves as African Development Bank, we work together with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, and also with the Asian Development Bank this year to produce a special focus on sustainable cities, livable cities. Because all of us are living in cities. So everything we're doing here is going to happen in cities or around cities, primary cities, secondary cities, or tertiary towns, or whatever. So we want to really focus around that more next year so that we can have a lot more maybe mayors, a lot more maybe governors, so that we can address real needs of some of our cities in a very different way. And that opens up quite a lot of opportunities for all of us around here. So my last word is, we around here are so pleased with the outcome of this particular African Investment Forum. Tremendous success. We have, as I mentioned in my remarks, 52 deals going into the boardrooms, and 56, and out of those, 52 of them got investors' interest. And that's impressive, you know. And with all of what I have seen here, the participation, the interest, the engagement, the excitement, the passion, I am absolutely confident that by God's grace, Africa will succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adishna. We will now turn over to members of the media and the press to ask your questions. Kindly identify yourself by name and the institution that you represent. We'd like to limit the questions, or rather, each questionnaire to one question, and to help us along, preferably direct your question to a specific member of the panel. Thank you very much. I see Massimo from Italy. I see your hand raised, and we'll come to the gentleman right in front of me over here, and the third right in the middle. So, and yes, over here. So why don't we start right on the left, and then we'll work our way backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ntakwana Ngatane, Eyewitness News. This question is to President Adishina. Now, we've seen the outcome of the infrastructure report, which indicates that, a quarter of funding went to West Africa. We've also seen, when I was in the marketplace during the energy presentations, most of them were actually from West Africa. Now, what I would like to find out from you is, do you not feel pressured to ensure that it looks like funding is going across the continent as opposed to where you're from?
Right away. Data matters, and correct data matters, because what you say is actually not correct. If you look at the transactions, the deals that went into the boardrooms this year, Southern Africa, where are you from, sorry? Oh, so you're from where you got the highest deals, actually. You know, Southern Africa region had $36 billion going into the boardrooms. It's the highest. It's in the SADC region. The second one is actually in Central Africa with roughly $15 billion. West Africa actually is $10 billion. If you take a look at North Africa, it's about $2.6 billion. And East Africa was roughly about $1.4 billion. Remember that this is not just, you can't just take one data point. You have to look at last year, you got to look at this year, you got to look at next year. It's a flow, that's what we're doing, right? But just to let you know that actually, you should be congratulating us for the highest deal being from Southern Africa region.
Thank you very much. We'll take the question from Massimo, then the gentleman next to you, over here, and in the back. And we'll take a batch of questions. Those will be the first set of 4 that we take. Massimo, you first.
Okay, Massimo Zaurini, Africa Affari from Italy. One of the most interesting data of last year was Africa investing in Africa. I don't know, probably it's too early, but if you have any idea about in this edition, what is happening.
Yes, good afternoon. I am from Mauritius. I work for a Swiss press. My question is about African integration. There has been a lot of excitement about it during the last 3 days. My question is, there are so many countries that have not yet ratified the agreement. How do you go about it? Because in 9 months, it's supposed to take off.
Thank you. Then in the back, then we'll come to the front.
Bonjour. Bon, excusez-moi, je vais poser la question en français. Monsieur le Président, il y a eu des engagements.
Ask this question in French.
Voilà. Your name and your institution first, please.
Adam Awad, directeur de publication.
Adam Awad, editor of Financial Africa.
Il y a eu des engagements.
There were commitments that were made and that were presented earlier on. Out of all of these commitments, we would like to know what concrete investments there, what are the commitments from the MAUs and what are the projections for the future? Thank you, Mr. President. I was saying that figures were provided. Out of those figures, what are the real investments? That is to say, where there was a deal that was signed, what are the MOUs, and what are the projections for the future?
Question from this session, right up front.
Thank you. My name is Tamrat, and I'm from the Addis Fortune. Just to hold you on a follow-up question there, talking about the share of investments or projects going. For East Africa, it's only $1.3 billion. And during the opening press conference, you said that you give priorities to countries that are low income and fragile. And how do you reconcile this two? Because the countries that are most fragile, most in the low income group are in East Africa and particularly Horn of Africa. But my question is, China is the largest partner for Africa, both in trading and investment. And if you look around the last 3 days, 72 hours, the visibility of China is almost, could I say, non-existent? Although you may see a couple of Chinese faces here and there. Does that trouble you? Thank you.
Invisibility. Oh.
And on that note, we'll go over to the panel.
So I'll let the AfriExim take the question on the ratification of the agreement on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Maybe also Tadase may want to pitch in on that. Yeah. And then on the other ones about MOUs, because you all signed MOUs of different kinds, so you might all pitch in on that question. And yeah, I'll take others. So let me turn it over to AfriExim.
Thank you, Mr. President. The ratification is a process. It's a sovereign process in each country, and this depends on their own national laws and their own legislation. Some of it has to go through Senate before being ratified, or some of it has to go through Parliament before being ratified. However, we are pleased to say that as of today, 54 countries have signed up, except for Eritrea, which is working on it. I know that there's an AU team that has gone to Eritrea and are working with Eritrea to sign. As for the ratifications, 28 countries on the continent have ratified, and it's become law in those countries. Most of those countries are working through their parliamentary systems and their executive systems to ensure that when business begins on the 1st of July 2020, we'll have all countries that have ratified the agreement. Thank you.
Just maybe to add to that, I think just one thing to note is with treaties, international treaties of this nature, you don't have to have universal ratification to have the treaty come into force. So in April, we achieved a very special milestone where the critical threshold was achieved with 22 countries who had actually ratified. So that actually brought it into force. The practicalities, though, is as my colleagues have said, of course, every country has to now domesticate and go through the normal process. But we are now at that critical stage where it's in force.
maybe talk about the MOUs. Je vais répondre à la question en français puisque M. Adama, vous avez posé la question en français.
I'm going to answer the question in French, since you have asked the question in French, Mr. Adama, for the MOUs and for the future investments, concrete investments. Specific figures will be provided later on, because the teams are currently looking at the figures. But what I may say at this stage is that what is very important in the context of the Africa Investment Forum is that projects are brought to financial close and implementation or execution. In the field I'm conversant with, which is infrastructure, project development is made up of a series of critical steps that lead to financial closing and building. For example, here there are a number of concessional agreements that were signed with the SkyTrain, for example, from Ghana. This is a crucial step in the development of a project, and we should celebrate the signing of such agreements, because it will, I do hope, open the door to financial close for next year. So we will give you the precise figures, but I believe we need to be very happy that we move through the different milestones for project development. An infrastructure project cannot be finalized in 2 months. There are a series of stages from design to signature. And what we want to do with the Africa Investment Forum is to shorten the implementation period. Projects sometimes take 5 years to be designed. We want to reduce that time. We want it to be 3 years, and projects that would take 3 years, we want to reduce them to 1.5 years. So this is what we want to achieve for the Congo Bridge project with President Adesina. This is a project we've been talking about for more than 10 years, but with the Africa Investment Forum, last year we started working on this project, and I do hope that by next year, and I'm putting some pressure on myself, that we will reach financial closure next year. And if we are successful, it means that we will have reduced the project lead time. So this is also one of the important aspects of the African Investment Forum. Adama, I believe what has just been said is very true. Look at the uniqueness of this platform. It is not a platform where people come and make pledges or promises. These are concrete project investments that were prepared with discussions with the investors, as you were able to see during the closing session. But there are the different stages and pledges or calls for manifestation of interest on the projects. And this, I believe, is extraordinary, to have a platform where people come and have confidence that the projects that are on this platform are projects that are of interest to us. As I told you, out of the 56 projects that were discussed in the boardroom, 52 received manifestations of interest by investors, which is extraordinary. This means that those projects were well prepared. So this is something you need to take into account. Then there's also the aspect of acceleration or speeding up of the financial close. This is something we have been working on. We try to fast-track the process, and Mr. Alain Ebobisse has just talked about this. And finally, there is the execution phase. We need to look at the ecosystems and realize that what does not change is the commitment in each of the phases. So this is the commitment that we are making here on our platform.
When it comes to the issue of African, I don't know who asked me the question, I can see. Huh? Africa to African, oh yeah, from Italy, yeah. And so we'll give you the breakdown later of what it is, but as you can see in the closing session, even while they were on, they were talking investments about investing in each other's places. Let me say that a lot of the biggest deal we actually have, transaction we have in this, is the Mozambique LNG project, which is really huge, and it attracted quite a lot of interest from many of the investors.
within Africa and also from outside of Africa. What you find in general is that there's an increased confidence by African investors in Africa. One of the things that we had in the boardroom was I think it's $1.6 billion investment to be made by Dangote into Togo on phosphates, you know. And I keep saying that one of the things I really like Dangote for is that he doesn't actually invest any of his money outside of the continent. He invests in the continent. So which means we want investors to have that confidence. Well, I was actually talking in one of I think it was the dinner yesterday, I learned that investors from South Africa, the same consortium that did the SkyTrain in Ghana, they're going to do also I think in Mozambique. And so you're seeing that the confidence for that outward bound investments is rising. And don't forget, if you even look at it from 2003 actually, to 2019, you find that intra-Africa, Africa-to-Africa investment, total, is about $102 billion. Out of that, 40% of that is actually from South Africa into other countries. The other countries are Egypt, Nigeria, Morocco, and Kenya. And so the reason why this will increase is because of the continental free trade area. So you're going to see a lot more outbound Africa-to-Africa investments, and because of the platform that we provide, because on this platform, you don't have to actually go from one country to one country. We aggregate transactions on this platform, so that reduces your own search costs and transaction costs that are involved. Now, on your question on East Africa, maybe I just use that to also address one thing. You know, last year, our largest actually transaction was from Egypt. $10.9 billion Tahir Petrochemical project. And so what happens is you cannot take a look, you can't say right now, that's what it is. No, you'll be wrong. Because the very fact that you don't have that big from a region doesn't mean that region is forgotten. Because last year, you just take North Africa, look, just one transaction, $10.6 billion, right? So it's all about preparedness, right? This is not it is not a political platform, right? This is an investment platform, preparation of projects, bankability of projects. Investors are the ones putting their money, and we are the ones backing them to be able to put their money. So I think you will see that it changes from year to year, and so it's not a single slice that you should be looking at. With regard to China, I haven't noticed what you said. I see a lot of people. I see a lot of interest by China in Africa. You know, I want to commend Afri-Exim Bank. Afri-Exim Bank helped with in Sochi the Russia Africa investment for a summit or something. And then you also have in South Korea, we have that in Japan with TCAT. We have what's the other one for China? China is a FOCAC, yeah, in China, everywhere. Now, what does that mean? What that basically means is that Africa is like a bride. Right? So you're a royal bride. Everybody wants to be doing business with Africa. So that is very important to bear in mind. Because they know African economies are growing. The population is rising. Urbanization is there. The market is there. Middle class is rising. And so apart from the fact that we have natural resources and things like that, and a youthful population. So everybody is looking at Africa. This is the place to be. And I think the person who made the comment, if you're not investing in Africa, you're not in business. And so I just want to say that Africa is bankable. That's why you're seeing all that interest in Africa.
Thank you very much. We'll take the next batch of questions. We'll start with Fifi in the back. Then we'll come up front here with the two questions here. And we'll end with the last two questions in the back. And that will be the end of our press conference this afternoon.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks, Victor. It's Fifi from CNBC Africa. This question is for President Adesina. We've heard how important it is for the private sector to be involved in the implementation, the operating aspect, and the monitoring of the free trade area deal. And I'm wondering, for the past 3 days, there have been a number of big companies, small companies here at this conference. What kind of conversations have you had with them about how to make sure that in 9 months' time, when this deal kicks off, it is a practical deal for them to work with? And also, in the 9 months that are still coming, what efforts will be had to ensure that more private sector involvement in implementing the deal is considered of, especially when we talk about the women-owned businesses and the youthful or the young-owned businesses? Thank you.
Thank you.
Helmut Price, the BRICS Post. The question is for President Adesina. In the BRICS, we have the BRICS Business Council that has a voice to persuade policymakers to do certain things. Do you have something envisaged in terms of the free trade agreement, where we have a single business voice that talks in terms of regulations and easing access across the continent? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carlos from the Portuguese news agency, from Lusa. You've been, and this question is for you, sir, Mr. Adesina. You have mentioned several times in this forum the bankability of private sector investment in Africa, and earlier this week you have announced as the biggest deal in this conference the gas deal in Mozambique of $1.3 billion. My question is, why would the bank want to invest 30% of 1.3 billion in Mozambique when the government has defaulted for the past 5 years $2 billion and owns ESCOM in South Africa more than 220 million rand?
Next question in the back.
Hi, I'm Farron Collins from Newsroom Africa. My question is for Minister Ngubane. I'd just like to know if you could give us an update just on the performance of South Africa at the forum, just in terms of the deals pitched by government. And if we can get an idea just of, women obviously was a big focus for this investment conference. How many of the deals that were, transactions that were completed went to women-led initiatives or, yeah.
My name is Richard Mark Mbaram. I'm CEO of Agro Africa. President Adesina, you promised at a time that we would have a green revolution in Africa by 2025. I would want to know how far that journey has gone and who are the partners in it with you on that work, and what's the next big thing really that we should expect from the Feed Africa strategy.
Thank you very much. Once again, we hand over to the panel to respond to the respective questions.
Let me take, whoever wants to take, yeah? You want to? Yeah, but let's take the one first on the small companies. And so maybe today say you want to go, and then we can have others I want to take on that, and then we'll come back to that question.
Yeah, I think the BRICS Post question around facilitation of private sector in regional arrangements around trade. I think the continental free trade is very young, as you know, it's just coming into force. It is building on 5 building blocks, right? So you have Africa in 5 sections, and each of those sections have regional economic communities that have existed for many years. And each one of those have their own business councils, and it's sometimes more manageable to have 15 countries bringing their private sector to interact as opposed to bringing 55 together. That said, of course, in the future, it's not to say there won't be big continental events. The Afri-Exim Bank does put together an annual free trade fair. They did one in Cairo, and it was full of the private sector. I think it's going to gather steam with the experiences from the RECs. Just quickly on the Mozambique FLNG project, I think I'll just jump in because TDB had the privilege of being one of the notable investors in the floating LNG project last year. And we disbursed $100 million in that project. And what gave us the confidence was that this was also an export-orientated project, right? So a lot of the natural gas in the form of liquefied LNG would be going to Japan as one of the big off-takers. $8 billion project, many different investors in it. And interestingly, Moody's has just upgraded Mozambique, I think it was a month ago. So I think those of us who invested last year kind of knew what was coming around the corner.
And also add on Mozambique, maybe not, I think Admas has touched on the risk mitigation aspect of it, but importantly, it's a very transformative project that will change the economy of Mozambique. So you also need to elevate the discussion beyond just at the transactional level, look at what does it stand to benefit the economy of Mozambique. So those are the considerations other than the nitty-gritties on the mitigation structures that we have put in place. But also importantly, apart from the structuring of it, the regulatory or the governance part, because government owns it. So government own that project, you know, through the ENH structures and the like. So they have their skin in the game in the project. So the success of it really, it's important to them as well. Thank you.
I think Africa 50 is not an investor in that project, but we are looking at a number of gas projects in terms of bankability. But the key point that my colleagues have said is that as African institutions, and actually many institutions which are willing to take a bit more risk, sometimes we don't want to wait until everything is perfect to make the investment decision. We want to work to see a direction towards improvement, and then we make a bet on things that will become better. And actually, those that actually make those bets based on reasonable information, reasonable assessment, they actually are the one that will make good money when things actually turned out to be good, like what my colleague Admasu from TDB Bank has said. And you have ways to structure those risks, to mitigate those, but also we are not waiting for things to be perfect before we make those bets.
Sorry, can I just add to that, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. So, you know, at AFC, like everybody else, we always say to ourselves that when you approve an investment, just assume that whatever can go wrong might just go wrong. And therefore, what is it going to be when that happens? Now, the essence of the statement is that we believe there is risk. It is not a coincidence that the project default rates for project finance in Africa is one of the lowest. It's lowest because we take the trouble to structure them, to mitigate the risks, to take early stage engagement, to bring in different stakeholders to work at different levels, to de-risk the project, to bring in a variety of investors at the right category of risk that they're happy with. This is not a myth. You can see the numbers for yourself. That speaks. So what I'm really trying to say is that we wouldn't be leaving our beds if we were not going to look at risk as far as Africa is concerned. As I was telling a global investor, Mr. Chairman, I was in the US a couple of weeks back, I said, unfortunately for us, Africa is not an asset allocation game. It is our game. It is our life. For you, you can afford to be fickle. Okay, thank you.
No, I think that's a great point. You know, just to support what he has just said, you know, if you look at the asset allocations, even among institutional investors, right? We know that it's quite low globally for infrastructure. It's still about 2%. And only less than 1% of that actually goes to Africa. But then, even among institutional investors, whether they're large ones or small ones, what you find is that those that are investing are the ones who actually are investing because in projects that have been well prepared, right? So those things that you see increased allocation by asset managers is to projects that are well prepared. And that's what we offer on this Africa Investment Forum platform. So just to support that. The second one I want to say is that, look, the very fact that I'm a father, right? And I got kids. Well, they're men now. The very fact that my kid made a mistake 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't have to be holding it over that kid's head. You learn from your mistake and you move on. The key is a mistake is a disaster when you never learn from it. I think some of the lessons that Mozambique has learned from that has been phenomenal. I have great confidence in Mozambique. You know, in terms of, we realize that you have to put in terms of transparency of debt, in terms of proper valuation of debt, and also looking for ways in which you do your debt management. And so all of those are great lessons that everybody has learned. But the economy is doing well. They just had a great election. They had an election, stable country. And so, and they've been discussing with IMF quite in terms of their programs and moving forward, and everybody seems to, all that seems to be going ahead well. Now, as per this transaction that we're talking about here, it's $24.6 billion LNG. That will have impact 15,000 people in terms of jobs, just like that. And as you're right in terms of the economy, it will diversify their economy to be able to actually be able to pay back some of their debt. They got to earn some money. And so we want them to be in a situation with projects that allows them to earn money, manage their money well, pay off part of their debt, and be a resilient economy. We're not in a punitive approach mindset. And let me say also that this is a transaction that has global players in it, as has been mentioned. Off-takers, I think, is Total or the Japanese, Mitsubishi and others. The thing is an SPV that is outside of Africa. I mean, the thing is a beautiful transaction. It's transparent, and I think it's a wonderful transaction. So the very fact that investors are putting their money in the transaction tells you that investors believe in that deal. They believe in Mozambique. If they didn't, they will not be putting their own money there. So I really think that it's a fantastic deal, and that's how we see that particular one. Now, when it comes to the issue of women-led businesses, I don't know who asked the question. So, okay, yeah, sorry. You know, the one that I can talk to you about, which we're really excited about, is the Alethea Identity Fund. We reached, close here, financial close here, with extra $58 million. And it's the only private equity fund on this continent investing in women. And so we are very delighted about that. There are going to be, of course, there are other businesses run by women that are making deals here, apart from just a fund that is probably investing directly in them. The other one that I want to say is respond to, I guess, is the BRICS thing. It's been handled brilliantly well by my brother Admasu. Business councils are there, trade councils are there, and we work all the time with the regional economic communities to make sure that the private sector is engaged. And there is something in Africa called the Afro Champions. The Afro Champions are the big businesses of Africa that are trying to lead many of the investments on the continent. So I think the private sector is right at the heart of the discussions on trade. I mean, people who trade are not governments. It's the private sector that trades. So they're at the heart of that. And finally is on this issue of agriculture. And I think Richard, I don't know where you are. Yeah. So on that, I won't take much longer because if you give me the agricultural field, I'll be here all day. I'll just make one point, which is the financing, one of the financing vehicles that's been at this forum that's going to help to drive that. And that's the Arise private equity vehicle put together by Olam. It's roughly it's going to be about, I think, about $1.6 or so billion, close to $2 billion, that will allow people to invest in it and invest in infrastructure to develop special agro-industrial processing zones in different parts of Africa so that you can have really world-class food and agri industries develop in areas that have the enabling infrastructure. So I think that would be a game changer for us in Africa, and we are so delighted with that. Right here, the DG is here from Treasury. My executive director from South Africa is here. We are already working with the government of South Africa. I think with about almost 22 or so special agro-industrial processing zones. Yeah, but they're going to start with 9. Yeah, but that's because we really believe that having these zones up is going to be game changers for food and agriculture in Africa.
Just maybe one quick point, just to give you a sense of also how some of the trade financing is coming in to support this green revolution. We, as you may know, are very specialized in trade finance, among other things. If you went back 5 years, you wouldn't find agricultural inputs as a very significant part of our trade finance basket. It would be typically consumables and strategic commodities that are imported. Now, about 30% of our trade finance book is actually agricultural inputs. The biggest part, of course, is fertilizer. And for the gentleman on that side of the room, you might be pleased to hear that a large part of that fertilizer trade is intra-African trade. And it's been about 3 years now since we've been pushing this. And at this meeting today, we actually managed to scale up our existing trade finance program for that fertilizer trade from what was about 200 million to about 400 million.
Sorry, if I may just add to that, just to bring in the infra context to agriculture, to kind of buttress the point that was made by the President, that the Arise example he gave. See, agri in its isolation has many challenges. And one of the things at AFC we picked up is if you cannot support agri, not just from a benefication point of view, but actually from a logistics, transportation, storage, and shipment point of view, trade finance being one of them, infrastructure funding being one of them, then agriculture as a sector becomes essentially dead on arrival. And that is what we are trying to do by collaborating with agri companies as an infra company, because that's where the winning combination is.
On that input side, just to say, I see a lot of movement on agriculture. So, for example, you have the Moroccans. You have the Moroccan fertilizer company, OCP, that we are all working with to set up fertilizer plants in different parts of Africa. So, again, Africa to Africa investments that you are talking about. They are doing that right now between Morocco and Nigeria. The other one is, even in Nigeria itself, Aliko Dangote is just going to be putting up to be operating from next year, a huge fertilizer plant. That will be 2 million metric tons. So that tells you that it's going to be massive. And talk of Africa to Africa investment, there's about $1.6 billion investment that Dangote will be making in Togo on phosphate. Again, it's to manufacture fertilizer so that Africa has its own capacity to produce the fertilizers that it has. Now, you must ask yourself the question, why are they doing that? That's because they can see effective demand is going to rise. You know, food consumption is going to rise. Food production has to rise. And we are collectively working, my vice president is here, VP Blanque, working to make sure that we create the enabling environment for agriculture to be a big business that benefits millions of our farmers. You know, I've never seen a farmer that wants to be poor. I come from a farming background myself. But they just need economic opportunities, and the best way to do that is to make agriculture a viable business that works for them. So I think that's really what we're really talking about. Yes, please, yeah.
There was a specific question about South Africa and South African projects. There were quite a number that were presented in the boardrooms, including the Ekurhuleni and Tshwane waste management, the Eco-City in KZN, as well as affordable housing in about 4 provinces. I mean, we really did receive a lot of interest from the investors. But over and above that, there were about a number of projects as well that were put on the digital portal, and many of them are on agro-processing, as President Adesina is mentioning, as well as property development, which actually comes from the private sector. So we managed to get projects not only from government, but as well as the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just to let you know some of the things that are coming up, especially for East Africa. One is the oil refinery, which is there in Uganda, that we are working on. That is huge. The second one, of course, is going to be the largest investment in railways that we've made on this continent. It's going to link the port, it's going to link Tanzania to Rwanda, Rwanda to DRC Congo, you know, in the Goma area, eastern region of Congo, and also linked to Burundi. So that's one of the things that we actually started doing. It's going to be a massive investment, and I hope that by next year, when you all come here, you'll be able to see a lot more of the details on that, on what's been done for that. But also in terms of the MOUs, somebody asked about MOUs. One that we are very excited about from the African Development Bank is the MOU that we signed with the United States Development Finance Corporation, you know, which is to jointly mobilize $5 billion of investments in projects on the continent, and that is massive. And so you just see that a lot of interests are coming in, and we are all very focused on how we can leverage each other to close the gap that we see. I think we are making great movements.
All right. Well, on that note, allow me to say a very big thank you from the left to Sanjeev Gupta, Africa Finance Corporation, Rene Auenberg, Afrexim Bank, Zodwa Mbele, DBSA, Alain Ebobise, Africa 50, Akiomi Adeshina, Chairman of the Africa Investment Forum, and President of the African Development Bank, Vuyewa Vumendlini, the Ministry of Finance, the Republic of South Africa, Admasu Tadesse, Trade and Development Bank, Maria Shaw-Barragan, European Investment Bank, and last but not the least, Chinelo Anahu. Please give them a round of applause. But the bigger thanks goes to members of the media. I see, absolutely. I see so many faces in the audience from North America, from Europe, from across Africa, from Asia, and we just want to say a very big thank you for being an integral part of this Africa Investment Forum. We are indebted to you and greatly appreciative. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Well, that's the final press conference here on the last leg of the Africa Investment Forum here at the Sandton Convention Centre in Johannesburg. I say a lot to chew on there, I say, Kenneth. Well, we've yet to unpack exactly what these deals are going to be, which countries are going to go to, which regions. But for the record, $40.1 billion in secured, which is up on 37.1 from last year. What was your take on the press conference?
Yeah, interesting for a second outing. You're doing just a bit shy of the target, but still an improvement from the initial African Investment Forum. But I think it's a win-win for everyone at the end of the day, because when you look at it, if there was no African Investment Forum, these 3 days would not have happened. And in these 3 days, we're seeing people coming to make pitches. You know, it kind of gives hope to people who have projects, who are looking for financiers, because these deals usually take years sometimes to complete. But then in 3 days, you're sitting down with presidents, you're sitting down with ministers, you're sitting down with investors who have the firepower, the cash to sponsor some of these projects and get them to final investment decision and the implementation. But all of this is happening in 3 days. Very commendable. I like the idea of what the new head of the African Investment Forum, Chinelo Anahu, she said. Something quite instructive, talking about the fact that women participated in this forum not just only as receivers of aid, but also they sat on the table and they are also talking about investing and closing deals, and they sat in this forum as investors, not just on the sidelines to receive aid.
And also, to be fair, 56 deals went to the crucial boardroom phase, where you've got the people with the projects on the one side of the table, you've got the foreign investors on the other, and apparently it was very rigorous. There were a lot of hard questions there, and all but 4 of those, 52, made it through. So it's a good sign that there are actually strong cases being made by people with projects who are looking for money.
Yeah, because look at it, it's just 4 deals that didn't make it. It doesn't mean that those 4 deals have been discounted. It means probably they still have to, dot their I's and cross their T's in some other places, and these deals will still probably come back. I'm sure there were a number of deals from last year who were taken off as well, but then later brought into this year as well. So we'll see how it goes. It's not the end of the road for those deals, but 52 out of 56, for me, that's an A.
And also, one of the big deals is in your neck of the woods in Nigeria. In fact, I understand from my notes that 4 projects in Nigeria, but one was 500 megawatt power plant. I mean, just tell us how badly energy is needed in the economy right now, and just tell us a bit more about this project.
Yeah, it's an interesting project. You know, we had some stellar cases here presented. In the Enyimba in International City was one of the projects tabled as well. We had governors represented from Nigeria. We spoke to a number of them earlier yesterday. They're talking about the interest that they are seeing from this project. They're talking about what investors are giving, the feedback they're getting back from investors. You know, saying it's all positive, but then still quite a lot to do when it comes to power, because it's a tricky subject in Nigeria. I understand that firsthand because we still have issues around cost-reflective tariffs. But the government is actually working to revamp the entire power industry. We signed an MOU with Siemens to kind of understudy what has been happening in the power sector for quite a while. They're still understanding, and then there's some. I understand that there's some money available which they're going to use to help support the power sector in Nigeria.
And how long do you think it's going to be before Nigeria and its economy, the largest in Africa, is going to get the power that it needs and reach that break-even point?
It's a tricky one because it's a value chain problem. The distribution companies have their issues. The generating companies have their issues. Right now, we also have issues around remuneration. So the discos are the ones who interface with the final consumers, so the cash gets to them. So there are issues around remitting the funds back to the other players in the market. But then the discos also have a valid position in saying that there are quite a number of people who are defaulting. And then it's hard for them to be the ones who will bear the brunt of those defaults. So it's more or less shared risk across the sector.
And last but not least, there's been 3 rigorous days, very disciplined people said who were in on these talks. What's your overall impression?
Africa is open to business, like the 3 presidents said on the first day. It's not like there's no challenges. It's not like there are no challenges. Yeah, not like there are no challenges, but the thing is having frank conversations, knowing what the challenges are, being frank and discussing it. All right, and then getting it together. All right then.
Okay. All right then. We'll go to a quick break. We're coming back with a little bit more coverage from the African Investment Forum here in Johannesburg straight after this.